Hi, I'm Chuck Dorset for Weaver Leather Supply. Let's make a set of saddlebags. But let's do this. Let's reduce the size down to a set of shoulder bags. For those of us that love a pretty set of saddlebags, this is exactly the thing we need. This is going to sit on our shoulder comfortably. Now, we'll look at the dimensions for a standard set of saddlebags, but it's all the same construction. All right, so anything I use in this video, weaverleathersupply.com, or check below. We've got links there. Going to take you straight to the website. Also, if you want to know when our videos release, just click your notifications. You'll know exactly when these come out. So let's step over, look at our pattern. This is a simple pattern with simple dimensions. We'll look at some digital pics here shortly, but we're going to look at what we're doing. Basically, all we've got here is two pouches. We're going to connect those together with a yoke. So right here, we've got our main body for our pouch. We're going to cut two of these, one for each side, but this is going to be our top grain up. So that will be our backing, but that will also be our flap. Right there is our pouch pocket, and then we've got a gusset. We'll cut two gussets and we'll sew each pocket together. From there, we're just going to add Chicago screws. In fact, I'll flip that over. Our screws are going to land right there. There's our flap. It literally is easy as that. We've got billets, both a tongue and a buckle billet, and on those two, we'll need to cut two of each. All right, so over to our digital pics. We're going to go with a width of 7 inches for our shoulder bags. So on our pocket, we're going to go 8 inches tall by 7 inches wide. We've got a hole at the bottom for a snap, line 24. We'll add a quick release on that. We need to cut 2. On our main body, cut 2, 7 inches wide, 14.5 inches tall. We've got 2 rivet holes for our tongue billet. Right here, we've got 3 holes for our Chicago screws. That's how we'll connect this over to our yoke. So on our yoke, 16 inches long by 7 inches wide, we'll cut 1. And on our gusset, we need to cut 2, 2 inches wide by 22 inches long. On our billets, we need to cut 2 each here, but those are easy enough. 7 by 3/4, 4 1/4 by 3/4. There's all of our measurements. Now I mentioned the dimensions for a standard set of saddlebags that come in all sizes, but this is pretty common. So on our yoke, we're going to go 18 inches long by 10 inches wide. On our backing and our flap, 10 inches wide by 20 inches, and our pocket 10 inches by 11 inches. Other than that, it's exactly the same thing. All right, let's step over to our main table, start cutting some leather. I love working with a poster board. It's easy to mark, but also easy to erase, but it's not very durable. And if we're going to make more than just one set of these, and I hope we will because there are so many decoration possibilities, but if we are, let's transfer our pattern over to our pattern sheeting. This makes a great pattern, easy to mark, easy to cut, but also very durable. Now on our leather, we're going to drop in a border design, very clean, very classic. The reason I mention that now is because we're going to go with our Herman oak. If we're going to carve or stamp, this is absolutely the way to go. This is our Herman oak natural strap. Now, one good point, we're going with a 7 to 8 ounce. We could go 8 to 9, absolutely, but I want to back off on that just a little bit. But we could go with a lighter weight, absolutely. But also, if we're not going to stamp or not going to tool, we can go with our water buffalo. This is our 5 to 6 ounce in chocolate. That would make a beautiful pair of shoulder bags. In fact, at Weaver, we have so many ways to go, it's hard to narrow this down. All right, so right here, let's set our gusset and our billets aside because we're going to case our leather. If we're going to stamp, we're going to case. So right here, I'm going to need 2 pockets, 2 main bodies, and our yoke. So let's start down here. Now we're going to mark with a pen. We should go with an awl, but we've got 2 things going for us. Well, first off, we're going to do our best to split our ink line, but secondly, we're going to edge this. So that'll knock off just about any extra ink we have. But a good point too, let's take a piece of scrap. Let's make sure we keep the excess ink off the tip of the pen. So I'm going to come in just a little bit, got just a little overcut there. So let's lightly trace in 1 yoke to each of our 2 additional pieces. Good. All of our pieces are marked, okay? So, new blade or short blade every time. Let's cut out our first piece. And our last corner, those look pretty good. All right, let's reset here, get some water on this leather. We're going to case our leather, but we don't have to. We can add water with a sponge as consistently as we can, give it about 15 minutes, then we can stamp or tool. But 2 big points. First off, Herman oak. But secondly, there's a big difference between simply wetting our leather and casing our leather. We've got a good video on that. Watch that to see exactly what I mean. But it's just a few steps here. So let's start off by getting our leather wet. Now I don't want to leave my leather in the water too long, but just about 3 passes. Good. Now if we do get too much water in this, not an issue. We're going to let it sit, let it air dry for just a little bit. Let some of that excess water evaporate off. Then we're going to put it in a baggie. And we've got our last piece out. So I went about 3 passes, then came back and gave it 1 more. That's that excess water I'm talking about. So let's take this, take a rag, and let's just daub that off. Those look good. Okay, let's give those about half an hour. That's exactly what we're looking for. First off, consistent. But secondly, I can feel these. They're wet, but I don't feel excess moisture in them. Very nice. So now let's put these in a baggie. And in fact, I get these extra large baggies from the folks over in shipping. Great, great folks. But if you don't have the extra large baggie, some plastic wrap will work. We just want to seal this leather. So let's put these in our baggie. And again, we're just sealing that off. Try to get our moisture as consistent all the way across the leather as we can. Now with this, we can leave this up to 4 days, but I would say no less than 4 hours. All right, well that case is, we're going to reset. Let's work on our gussets and our billets. Let's go with a 4 to 5 ounce, both for our gussets and our billets. Now on our billets, I'd like to go with a little bit heavier weight, maybe a 5, 6, 6, 7. But I don't want us to feel like we've got to have multiple weights to make a simple pair of shoulder bags. So a 4 to 5 for both is going to work nicely. Now, single shoulder, this is a great cut for us leather crafters. Very affordable. But look at the size of that piece of leather. And it's a good quality piece too. Notice the flesh side, how clean and tight that is. So let's go with a 4 to 5, both for our gussets and our billets. Now our gusset, 2 inches wide. Well, it just so happens our straight edge, 2 inches wide. So let's cut 2 straps out, 2 wide, and then we'll cut to length. And split that ink line. Those look good. Okay. Now we need our billets. We need a tongue and a buckle side, so out of one of these pieces of scrap. Let's go with our wooden strap cutter. I'm going to set this at 3/4 of an inch. Let's cut out 2 straps. Okay, let's trim these to size. Good, we've got that. Let's reset here, clean up a little bit, then we'll bevel and groove our edges. Let's start with our tongue side. With our groover, I'm going to set this at 1/8 of an inch, and I'm going to leave it there for the entire project because we're going to be marrying gussets to the pocket and the body. So let's keep that where it is. Let's groove both sides. Nice. Now let's go with our edger. This is the #1 Master Tools edger. We are edged. Very nice. Okay. With our awl, let's mark for our holes. Good. We've got those marked. I'm going to do the same thing right here. And those are done. Okay. On our gussets, let's go with the same thing. We're going to groove all the way around, edge all the way around. Those look good. Okay. Let's take these pieces. We're going to step over to our punch table. Let's drop in our round holes and our punches. We've got some great revolving punches at Weaver, But for this video, let's go right to the top. This is the best revolving punch I've ever used. Biggest point, right there, the anvil is replaceable. With 99% of the tools out there, once that anvil goes, doesn't matter how nice or how sharp our tubes are, the whole tool is shot. So let's start here with our rivet holes. I'm going to come up to about the third tube. I want a smaller hole there, first off so it lines up better on our pattern, but also because if our rivet's a little bit snug in that, it's going to be a better bite. It's going to have more durability in my opinion. Good, we've got that. Now for our buckle, smaller strap, smaller buckle. So maybe let's come up to about the fourth or fifth tube. Let's finish those out. And our last hole. Now in all honesty, might have gone with a smaller tube for that, but that's going to work nicely with our buckle tine. All right, so English point. Let's start right here. On these two straps, 3/4 inch Master Tool English punch. Good. All right, we've got that. Now on the other end, let's go with our Master Tool 3/4 inch round end punch. And over to our billets. Round end punch, this is going to be our line 24. So let's go all the way out. We're giving that snap or that billet a little extra tab there, just so we have a tab to grab under our snap. And over to our oblong. Now the rule in leather, or the rule with our punches, 3/4 inch strap, 3/4 inch oblong. But I'm going to go a little bit longer, give our buckle a little more room to move. So let's do our best to line those up. And we've got that. Okay, back over to our main table. And those pieces are ready to die. So back over to our cased leather. I've given this overnight. I can actually feel this. That is heavy. There's a lot of moisture in our leather. So now let's take this out of our baggie. And I'm going to lay this out. Give these about 1 hour dry time just in the air, because we want our leather to start to return to its natural color. So let's give these about an hour right where they are. I've actually given these about 2 hours dry time. It's a little bit humid here today, but really what we're looking for, it's cool to the touch. I can feel some moisture in that, but we've got our body. That's what we're looking for when we're stamping or carving. So we're going to go with a barbed wire stamp, and it is about time we use this stamp for a border. It looks good and it's easy to line up. So with this, to get one barb and 2 pieces of wire, we need a 1.5 inch spread. So on my pattern, I've come in 3/8 of an inch because that's a little bit wide. I'm going to bring that in. We've got a stitch line going in there, and I'm going to give that a 1.5 inch spread. That'll give us 1 barb, 2 pieces of wire, and a barb. Now, our leather has expanded a little bit when we've cased this. It'll do that when we're stamping or tooling as well. If we really got tight parameters, we can trim this to size. But on this project, everything's the same. If it's going to expand or contract, it's all going to do it the same. So we're going to leave it right where it is. But let's do this. So I've marked my pattern. Where I'm going to mark for my spots, I've marked those in red. Punched holes are black. That's so I don't make a mistake. Well, let's center this. I've got just about 1/8 of an inch on either side. So with our awl, I'm going to take this and I'm just going to place a very light mark. Just enough to see. We're going to overstamp that, but because of the barb, we'll be able to see that mark a little bit. But let's mark that lightly. Good. And on this side, same thing. Good. While we're here, let's scoot to this end. Mark for our Chicago screws. And scoot and mark. Okay, next up, let's go to one of our pockets. Same thing, 3/8 of an inch in, 1.5 inch spread. We've got that, and for our rivet hole, okay? Same on our backing and our flaps. And for our rivet holes, now on some of these, I might have marked these a little hard because I'm looking at punched hole while I'm marking marked hole. Let's drop in our screws, and there we go. Now, one more. You don't have to go this route, but we're going to add one more little stamp design. It's one of my favorites. Very Western, if we want to give this a good Western feel. So on our paper pattern, all I've done is I've come in from the edge 1 3/4 inches, which is exactly centered. This is 7, 3 1/2, 1 3/4, and up from our bottom, I'm coming up 2 1/2 inches. So let's make a mark right there, same on this piece. Good, we've got that. Now, if we were gonna do a lot of tooling or a lot of stamping, I would say let's take our first piece, work on that, put everything else in our baggie until we're ready. So in fact, why don't we do that? Let's take this piece over to our table, and I'm gonna put these in our baggie just to keep them where they are. There are 2 stamps for our barbed wire. They're not a set, we have to buy these separately, but let's start with our barb. This is what we're gonna drop in on our marks. So with this, I'm going to do 2 things. Let's come in, do our best to get that right over our mark, but secondly, let's do our best to make sure that the barb is parallel to the edge. Yeah, and look at that impression, cased leather. Now, we can re-wet our leather, absolutely, if we're doing a lot of stamping or tooling. The thing is, the more you wet it, the more our impressions are going to back out. All right, so let's go to the next, do exactly the same thing. And let's work our way around. When we get down to our corner, let's do our best to try to keep that parallel to the edge in the corner. Good, now let's don't go one more because that's a hole and not a barb. Okay, next over to our wire. Now this is going to be a little bit tougher, but what I'd like to do is overlap this tool by just a hair, so therefore the lines continue consistently. So let's squeeze that in right up to the barbed wire, or right up to the barb. Do our best to center that, and let's do our best to make sure that is straight. Okay, let's overlap the end just a hair. And there we go, relatively consistent, but let's step back. And we can always come back and re-stamp a stamp. Say right here, I didn't really get heavy enough on my right side. I can feel that stamp sit down in there. Let's give it a little extra on that. It's easy enough. They fit right in these like a key. All right, let's do that again. Good, and back to there. And maybe just one more. That's what I'm talking about, getting those lines to be consistent when we butt the stamps together. So down here, we're going to turn this at just a bit of an angle. And turn this at just a bit of an angle. Good, let's work our way around. Talking and stamping doesn't always make the best outcome, but that looks good nonetheless. That could be a little better. But anyway, next up, this is a very cool design. Now we're going to use 4 different tools on this. You don't have to go with this design. Pick up whatever tools you've got on your bench and just experiment. No telling what's going to come out. But to me, this is a very Western look. So let's start with a circle burst. We've got our marks. I'm going to do my best to hit that mark right on the nose, and I can press that in just a little bit, and I can see that is right on the nose. Good. All right, next tool up, this is called a shell burst. This is a great tool. Love the design of this. So let's do our best. We're going to put one up. Good, and then one down. Okay, we've got that thus far, looking good. Now let's take an axe head. Wrong tool. Yeah, here we go. Let's take an axe head, and I'm going to drop this in on all 4 sides of the circle burst. you'll see where we're going with this. So that curve sits right in the curve of the shell, and the inside curve right inside there. Good. Now let's do a second right there. And 2 on this side. Okay, looks good thus far. Now technically this is a figure carving tool, but to me it's more of a sunburst or maybe a camo tool, but it's a little hard to get this one straight up and down. So let's do our best to butt that on top of the shell. Good, and 1 down. All right, I'm going to do the same thing over here. Okay, there we go. And then we're going to drop a spot right in the middle. Of course, I love the spots. Well, that looks good. I'm going to do the same thing to the other backing and flap. Okay, there we go. Those look good. They're going to look nice with a single spot in the middle. So now I'm going to do the pocket faces, and we're just going to add the barbed wire to those. Okay, we've got our pockets done, but over here on these longer pieces, those are our screws, so that's actually the back of our bin. But over here, let's just add 2 pieces of wire to that just to finish it out. Okay, well those look good. Next up, let's do our yoke. And just like our other 4 pieces, we're going to do exactly the same thing, but down here, we'll drop a stamp right in the corner, but let's leave that where it is. Again, most of that is going to be behind our flap. Okay, well, very nice. Everything's stamped. Now we could add our design from our flap to right here. Up to you if you want to go that way, but I'm going to leave our yoke right where it is. So I'm going to lay these out on our main table and give these at the very least overnight to dry. Our stamp pieces are dry and they look good. Nice. All we have to do, a little edge work, drop in our chisel. We're ready to die this project. So on our yoke, we're just going to do our outside edges. That's going to curl behind our pocket. So on our groover, let's do both outside edges. Okay, we've got that. Now, we're at a 7 to 8 ounce. Let's go with a number 2, and let's edge both sides, front and back. And our back, or the flesh side, never edges as well as our top grain, but that looks good. So over to our pockets. I'm going to groove the front side all the way around. We'll edge all the way around, but on the back side, let's just edge across the throat. Good, there we go. Now we don't want to edge down here because we're going to have our gusset and our pocket coming together. We want to make a good meet there. And over to these pieces. Now on this, on our front side, we're going to bevel, groove all the way around. But on our back side, we'll be dropping in our pocket right here. So I'd like to just edge my back from this point around the flap. Good, there we are. We've got those done. Let's take this over to our punch table, punch our holes. We could use a revolving punch for the majority of the holes on our project. The problem is, right here and right here, we'll never get a revolving punch in that, so we're going to go with a drive punch. This is our master tools. This is a nice tool. Watch how easy this punches. So right here on our yoke, we're going to go with a 3/16. We got Chicago screws on both ends. Let's go with a 3/16 inch round hole. Notice how easy that tool punches. Quality tool. So over on our flap, we're going to have Chicago screws across the top and then 2 rivet holes. Good, we've got those. So now for our rivet holes, let's go down to 1/8 of an inch. We've got those. Okay, on our pocket flaps, right here we're going to add a Chicago or a line 24 snap for a quick release. Well, what I didn't do on these, I punched these for a rivet hole and not a line 24. So let's go up on a revolving punch about the 4th tube up. Let's repunch the holes in our billets. And let's use the same hole for our 1 hole on our pockets. Good, we've got that. Let's go over to our pattern table and mark for our chisel line. We're going to knock in a pretty hand stitch line on these. If we have a machine, we can absolutely use it. But if not, that's not going to stop us. Now, a little explanation as to what we're doing here. Over a distance, as we chisel, our chisel line can expand or contract. We need these to line up. So what we're going to do, let's reduce the risk of that happening. We're going to mark the very center of our project, and then we're going to chisel out. Again, we need these holes to line up. So let's start right here with our pocket. There's my center line. I'm going to make a small mark right in our groove line. Let's do the same thing on the other. And over to our main body. Now let's don't get confused here and mark this end. We can if we're going to sew all the way around. But let's mark our center on this end on both pieces. Good, we've got those. Okay, now over to our gussets. We've got that centered, lined up, so let's make a mark in both groove lines on both pieces. Okay, let's go knock in a chisel line. This is one place we need to take our time because the one thing we don't want is for our pocket to be crooked on our main body. But if we count chisel holes, and that sounds incredibly tedious, actually quite the opposite. You'll see what I'm talking about. But if we count our chisel holes, our pockets will match every time. So let's start right here. We're going to go with an 1/8 inch flat chisel, one of my all-time favorites. Looks good, but also, if our holes aren't perfectly aligned as we go around these corners, actually that's mostly the reason we're counting holes. But if our holes aren't perfectly aligned, with an 1/8 inch flat, we've got a little room for error there, okay? So we've got our mark. I'm going to take my first tine, and I'm going to center that right over that center line mark. Let's drop our chisel in our groove line. Now, in a perfect world, I can get this chisel through straight up and down. I don't live in that world. But what I don't want to do is lean out, because now we run the risk of our chisel hole coming out of the side of the leather. So let's do our best to straddle that mark with that first tine, sink our chisel into our groove line, and hit that straight on. Now, let's do our best to get the full width of that tine through that hole, because when we go to sew, that's going to make the whole thing much easier, okay? So now let's back down to a 4 tine. What I want to do, I need to get these as centered as I can, because our stitch line, it can expand and contract if we're not paying attention. So I'm going to do my best to get that first tine last hole. Good, yeah, 4 goes through so much easier. Less metal going through and coming back out. So now let's step over to a 2 tine. So what we can do to get good spacing, because in my opinion, that's the corner is the hardest place to get that. Let's center that best we can, make a mark. Now let's put first tine in that mark. Good. Let's do that again through our curve. Let's come in with one more 6. Okay. Let's back down to our 4. And let's drop in just one more hole on the end. We absolutely could have done that with a 2. All right, let's count our holes. Here's the easiest way to do that. We've got our 6 tine. So there's 6, 12, 18. I counted half of our holes in less than 2 seconds. So let's count these. In fact, let's do this. Let's don't count our first centered hole. There's 36, there's 42, 43, and 44. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, and I bet I get exactly the same number of holes. And we've got 44 chisel holes, very nice. I'm going to do the same thing to the other pocket. And 44, now it takes a little extra time to do that, but by counting our chisel holes, we can't miss. Everything's going to match up nicely. All right, so over to our main body and flap, I'm going to do exactly the same thing. We've got our center mark right there. I'll work out, but where we did 44 holes on our pockets, let's do 45. That way we can secure down the top edge of our gusset. That's not going to dog ear on us. All right, so let's work here. 45 on either side, not including our starting point. And there we are, 45 each side, and that didn't take too much time. Okay, so over to our gussets, same thing here. We're going to start on our center mark, work our way out. We want 44 holes each side. $44, we've got it. Easy to line these up with a flat chisel. All right, let's add some dye. Let's go with our Pro dye. It's the only dye I use. And how about mahogany? This is actually a very pretty color. It's going to make our shoulder bags look good. Now, quick rundown for the folks that are new. Cheap plastic trash bag to protect my work surface. But if we dye on this, it's an absolute mess. So let's put some cheap paper on top of that. In fact, this is the shipping paper from Weaver. If you order a piece of leather, well, first off, thanks for the business. But this makes a good dyeing surface. It's going to absorb that dye. Right here, I've got some hooks made with wire. That's just cheap wire from any hardware store. And let's start right here. I've got a rag just to mop up any excess dye, but we're going to dip dye these. And again, with the Pro and dip dyeing, we can't go wrong. So let's put that on a piece and let's just run that through our dye. Good. Let some of that excess drip off. And now with our rag, just if there's any dye left over, let's just mop that off. Okay, good. I'm going to do the same thing to the rest of the pieces, but over here on our gussets, we don't have any holes, and I don't want to get fingerprints on this. So all we have to do, let's take a little of our wax thread, run that through a hole, and now we can easily run that through our dye. Now with most any dye, we need good ventilation. I've got a good cross breeze, got a fan in on one end, fan out on the other, but we can always dye outside if the weather's nice. Now, we can always make a double hook out of our wire if we need to. Makes things a little bit faster. And there we are, how easy is dip dyeing, and these are going to be beautiful. So now let's give everything, I would say about 2, maybe 3 hours dry time. Our project has had ample time to dry. That's a pretty color. Well, yes and no. It's a little bit flat. When we add our top coat, these are going to pop. On that note, we're going to go with our Leather Balm top coat. My old favorite. I really should fan out, but in my defense, I know exactly what's going to happen. It's going to enrich in our dye color. It's going to give us a low gloss, but also if we apply to our edge, it's going to darken our edges a little bit. So to apply this, let's go with a piece of fleece. This is from sweatshirt, sweatpants, but it's going to absorb a good bit of the Leather Balm, so therefore we can do a larger project. So what I want to do, when I get this wet with the balm, I want to go very lightly, sparingly, and easily. Let's just work our way across and back. What I don't want, streaks and bubbles. Those are going to show up. So let's wet our rag. Wick that out just a little bit. Good. Now let's easily work our way across the project. Good. Let's watch out for those streaks and bubbles. Okay, let's give that just about maybe a full minute. Let that wax wick in. Good. There we go. I'm going to do the same thing to this piece. Good. Wipe off some of those streaks. Now let's come back over to this piece. Let's take a simple cotton rag just from a t-shirt. Now let's buff. And we don't even really have to buff very hard, But there we go. That looks good. Now let's come back with our rag and let's just hit our edges. Clean those edges off and let's just buff around the edge just to get the excess off. There we go. All right, those two pieces look good. I'm going to do the same thing to the balance. Everything looks good. We've got a nice gloss. Even on our billets, gussets look good. Very nice. Let's step over to our punch table, add some hardware. Let's set the line 24 snap on our pocket. We could do this later, but it's more easily done now. So on our line 24 snap, we're going to go with the antique nickel. And at Weaver, we can get the finish to line up on all of our hardware. We'll come through the back, little bit snug. Good. That's going to be, in my opinion, the most durable bite. So right here, this is the line 24 setter from our 4-piece setter set. That's a good buy. Covers us on everything. So let's set this. And I want to roll that post nice and clean down in there. But let's get that to set just enough to where it doesn't spin. That's where we are. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. And those look good. Okay, let's set our spots. Right here on our main body, we're going to put a spot in each of our stamp designs. First and foremost, setting spots, the best way to go. Our little wonder, that will set just about everything we carry, rivets, snaps, and spots. But if we don't have a little wonder, we can easily set our spots by hand. So with this, we're going to go with the 1/4 inch antique nickel flower spot. These look good. They've got a nice little design. Now we're on veg tan, and we've got a stamp with a design on it. So it's going to be a little bit tougher to see, but to set these by hand, just 5 easy steps. So let's take our spot, and I've got my mark right inside the stamp. Let's press that in, straddle it, press that in. Good. I don't know if the camera can pick that up, but now I've got marks for my spot tines. All right, just a simple little cardboard palette and our art knife. Now on this great art knife, I love this, but the blade, when you get the blades for this, or when you buy the art knife, it's got a shorter, wider blade. This is the replacement blade. It's longer and thinner. So let's take our piece. Now I don't want to, I'm going to cut through this, make 2 slits, but I don't want more slit than tying on the spot. So let's cut through, let's flip our knife around and come through from the other side. Good, now let's see if our spot will push through that. And it does nicely. Now, if those holes, if we haven't cut our slits wide enough, we can always put this on our little pallet and then push that through with our mallet. But the best way to go, let's see if we can't get that to slide through. Looks good, okay? So on our back, let's be careful. We got an open blade there. Let's bend our tines inward. Good. Now, last step, I'm going to tap this down. I'm not going to hit it hard enough to ding the spot. Good, that's all we need. But now on the back, I can feel that our tines have actually curved in. Actually, I really can't feel that. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing for the other 3 stamp designs. Very nice. That's actually a very pretty design. Good. All right, let's go sew these together. Let's start with our trusty sewing pony. Can't do it without it. In fact, this one is 10 years old. I've sewn every project on this. Worth every penny, but 2 good points. Well, first off, when this is new, let's glue some leather around the jaws just to keep from dinging our project. These edges can be a little bit sharp. But secondly, the best trick I can offer, right here on our lever, let's put a little tape on that because our thread is bad about grabbing that lever, opens up the pony, and our project falls down. Very frustrating. Okay, so over on our thread and needles, I'd like to go with a white stitch line on these because to me that's very Western. And if we were going to sew around the flap, we may go that way. But let's go with our brown. This is the Ritza 0.8 millimeter. We've got some gorgeous colors in this, multiple thicknesses, but I like the 0.8 millimeter. On our needles, my favorite all-time hand sewing needle, the John James. This is the number 18. No sharp point. It's a hand sewing needle. Our holes are already pre-punched. That actually is a nice touch. So let's start by sewing our gusset onto our main body. So I've got just a cheap, inexpensive clip from a hobby store. I don't want a clip that's got a lot of pressure on it because I don't want to ding our project. But here, we've got to remember, we're going to start on the second hole. So let's do our best to get the first hole here lined up with the second hole there. And we're just going to clip that on. Our thread is going to tell us where this is going to land, but let's get a needle going first. So on our thread, we're doing a basic saddler stitch. We need a needle on both ends, and I want 4 times my length on my thread. So with our first hole, right at the top, let's just take 1 needle, go through that. Let's even out the length on our thread, okay? Second hole, we're gonna go with both needles, same time. So let's pull this through. 1 from the front, 1 from the back. So notice I'm at a bit of an angle. Well, let's take our clip, push our gusset this way towards us. So now everything's going to line up nicely. Let's pull that through. Good, we've got that. Give that a little bit of tension. Next hole, both needles, same time. So now let's get halfway through. I'm going to pull down on the eye, basically make an X. Let's move our fingers from the eye to the tip and pull that through. It's as easy as that. Give it a little tension. But also notice too, our needles are going right through the chisel holes because when we chiseled, we got the full width of that tine through the leather. And there we go. All right, I'm going to sew all the way around to the other side. And down to our second to the last hole. Well, notice right here, we've got a beautiful meet simply because we didn't change our groover setting between body and gusset. So let's come down to the last hole. Let's come through both pieces of thread. Now, this is going to be a little bit hard to see, but what I want to do is I'm going to come back down to the second hole in, and I'm just going to come through the gusset. Good. All right, let's scoot that over. There we go. So it lays on top of that piece. On the back side, I'm going to come back through the second hole, but just through the back ply. Good. Now right here, let's tie a square knot. Right over left, left over right. And give that some good tension. Good. Now with our knife, we rarely use this part of our blade. So I'm going to put that, I'm going to lay it on top of the thread and pull the thread across it. Instead of pushing down on the thread, we run the risk of cutting our project. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing to the other piece. And there we are, that one is done. All right, let's reset here. We'll sew the pocket face onto our project. This little clip, not strong enough to hold this very long. To have a clip that's going to have enough strength to do that, we're going to ding our leather. But really, we just need that to stay there long enough for us to get a couple of stitches in. So on this side, we're going to do it a little bit differently. So our first hole, 1 needle through our first hole. Good, looks perpendicular to our edge. So let's pull that through, even out our thread. And I'm going a little easy here because I don't want that to pop off just yet. So second hole, now we start sewing. Both needles, same hole, make an X, pull that through. All told, our little clip held out pretty well, good. We've got some stitches in. So now let's take this little clip, just to make this a little easier. Let's clip it on this gusset, and now that will just rest on that while we sew. And there we are. Well, that one looks very good, nice, clean and straight. Now, if you're not certain of your hole count, let's just start on our center hole and work our way up on both sides. All right, I'm going to do the same thing to the other piece. And we've got 2 good pockets. That one looks nice too. All right, we are close to having this done. Let's step over to our punch table. I almost wish we had gone with an antique on this. That'd really show off that groove line and our stamp designs, but at the risk of making this video even longer, we're going with this, but it looks good. So let's start here. We're going to attach the tongue side to our flap. Let's go with our medium double cap rivets, or technically the 5/16 inch. Okay, that looks good. Same on the other pocket. Okay, over to our billets. So let's start. This is a beautiful buckle. I love these. In fact, I use these on a lot of my own projects. So let's set our buckle in. And then let's get our keeper. Since we don't have a lot of room to work here, let's squeeze our keeper in. Good. Now let's go with the small double cap. This is the 1/4 inch. Since we're going through 2 4-5s, and I can lay this on the edge of my table so the loop or the bend back has room to hang off. And now let's set these. All right, those look good. We are almost there. But now a tricky part, because we're going to set a line 24 in a 4 to 5 ounce leather. That's a little thin for our line 24, but we just need to be careful. I almost wanted to go with our Sigma snaps, but we need a more durable snap here. So let's set this best we can. I'm going to drop that in that last indent, and I'm just going to do my best to get that post to curl down in there evenly. Good. And if we go easy, we can set line 24s on thinner leather. And same with the other side of the rivet. I'm going to set that just enough to where it doesn't spin. All right, let's go put our screws in. We're done with this project. And the last step is the easiest step. We're just going to drop in some screws. Now, on a typical pair of saddlebags, we need some way to tie these off to the saddle. What we can do is add a billet with a D, or even a clip with a D, and our screws work on these. Sometimes when they bend these plates around, it's not a perfect meet, but if we push, those will typically go right through. But the point is, we want our clip with a D or our billet forward towards the bend. If we think about it, that's where the saddle seat is. On these, I'm not going to worry about those. So with our Chicago screws, we're going to drop in 3 on either side. What I'd like to do is let's add a little dab of glue to these. Now, we could sew these in, but a good point, if we go with the screws, we could always pop these off of the yoke. Now, with a strap or some belt loops, we've got a nice big pouch. So let's add a little bit of our white glue into the throat of each of our screws. And we don't need a lot of glue in there. We just want to keep those from working out. So let's do this. Let's come through from our cap, because technically we can see this side. Maybe not so much this side. We'll put our screw back here. But one good point, when we punch this, we punch from the top grain through. So therefore, the screw is probably not going to want to come through from this side. Let's take our awl and just open that up a little bit. Let's drop a screw in that hole. Good. Now let's flip this over. Great thing about the screws from Weaver, we've got an Allen wrench slot right there. So let's line this up. And these are 1/4 inch screws, perfect size for 2 8 to 9s back to back. Get those good and tight. Very nice. I'm going to do the same thing to the balance. And everything fit nicely. We've got a good pattern. So before we finish these, let's do this. I'm going to reset and move that glue, because something is going to land in that. There we are. Okay, let's snap our billets on. Let's fold this over and see how our fit is. That is just perfect. Very nice. Well, there we are. I am really happy with those. Those look good. Now, a couple points. Like right here, we've got a 1.5 inch spread on our barbed wire. I almost feel like that's a little tight. It's almost the perfect measurement, but maybe let's back that out a little bit. And like I mentioned, some antique would really set this off. But all told, I am happy with these. Good pattern, nice outcome. Now that we've got a feel for these, make them your own with decoration. Sky is literally the limit, but I'm happy with the way these came out. Now, we can't get our laptop or our tablet in these, but we've got all kinds of room for all kinds of stuff. I hope you have a great time making your shoulder or saddlebags, and I hope they come out beautifully. Good luck with your projects.